Hello. You are listening to the Carroll Connection with your host, Jared Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Carroll Connection. I am your host, Jared Carroll, here to bring you guys another great episode. I want to take a chance to shout out my last interviewed episode, which was episode 147 with Mark Furtado. And on that episode, he talked about his brand, The Artisan, referencing kind of his first appearance on the podcast, episode 101. Check that out probably before you watch episode 147. I would recommend that. Mark's a fantastic person, and we just talked about what he's been doing, changing, kind of focusing on his brand and himself as a person and just growing through that process. I really do enjoy return guests, and I think that episode kind of is inspiring this idea to go get former guests, bring them back on the podcast and kind of catch up and stuff. I think it was a great episode, and I'll get into that on this episode as well, that kind of concept. But check it out, thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the major listening platforms. And if you like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search The Carroll Connection, and it should pop up right for you. And if you want to return as a guest or you want to be a new guest, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll, at The Carroll Connection, and we'll set that up. So that kind of brings me to today's episode. I'm not going to number this episode. I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to drop this between this episode and an episode that I've recorded with Wally from Ever Changing Vibe. So I'm kind of in a weird place with July, kind of just busy with schedules and stuff like that. So I kind of put together a separate little episode with him, and I'm doing this episode, a solo episode, my first solo episode in a long time. And for the people who have listened to me consistently throughout different episodes or even have tuned into my solo episodes, you know that I am not a crazy fan of doing solo episodes. But I was listening to Wally on the Ever Changing Vibe, and he had done a solo episode recently where he was talking about pretty much kind of working that muscle of going on rants. If you guys have listened to our collabs, we've done many in the past, but he talks about being able to kind of just go on rants and really kind of power through them and go on these very long monologues about certain topics or ideas or things like that. And it's always really impressive for someone that can kind of just go on a topic rant and just kind of carry that and make a point with it. So for me, I felt like it was important to kind of start working that muscle and getting back to trying to do solos and kind of using this as a kind of place as a journaling session, but obviously recorded and verbally spoken versus written down in like a journal or typed in an app or something like that. And you guys know that's how I do my solos. It's kind of just vulnerable, free flowing, just what I think. And the title and the concept of the majority of what's going to be talked about in this episode is content isn't everything. And if you've listened to me for a long time, you will know that I definitely had my kind of span of time where content was like everything to me. Content, I just needed to make content. Didn't matter how I was making content, just pumping it out, making sure I was getting a new episode out each week that I possibly could. And that has definitely changed as I've kind of grown within this. We are getting closer towards this November will be 4 years of doing this podcast, which I'm extremely excited about because it's just like crazy to think about back in 2019 when I started this and how much it's grown, how much I've grown as a person, the content developing into what it's become. And I really value each individual conversation and even the solos that I've had. I think it's a chance to reflect. And I've said it from the beginning, give me 5 to 10 years with this type of stuff. And I think these episodes are going to age really well. I think it's going to be really cool to look back on all the content that I've made with different people, and hopefully they'll come back and we'll talk and see the growth between episodes like we did with Mark and some of my other guests that I've had in the past, like couple years or so that I've done return guests with. And I think it's important to do that. But I also think it's important to do solo episodes every once in a while. Not too much for myself because obviously the Carroll Connection brand as of right now is centered around my guests, and I like that and I want to keep it that way because that is something that I really do enjoy. But getting back to the concept, content isn't everything. And within this last year or so, I've kind of had a shift in mindset where it hasn't so much been about producing content, trying to get views, trying to get likes. It's about creating quality. And I think when you're in the content space, you can get pretty preoccupied with that concept of like trying to just make stuff so people see it and just continually going with the flow. But I don't think that's the point. The point is to produce quality. And for myself, getting back to those conversations, enjoying the conversation, being in the moment of those conversations is like the most important thing when having a podcast. And I've had a lot of conversations recently that's kind of reignited this fire where I really enjoy the moment that I'm spending with someone when I'm having them sit across from me on a podcast and interviewing them. I think that has kind of changed this mindset where this content isn't everything. It's about the person. It's about having quality time. It's working that conversation skill, the communication skill. And that's what's been lost through social media. And I've been able to kind of work that muscle and bring it back. So I'm kind of glad that I've kind of reignited this passion with kind of just having the conversation, not so much about the content. And I think it's important to acknowledge that on a solo episode so people can kind of see this growth, so I can see this growth when I look back in years to kind of see how this has developed and changed. And if you guys actually listen to my most recent appearance on Ever Changing Vibe, episode 117, I believe it's Validating Growth was the title. And it's the probably the best conversation that me and Wally have had on a podcast to date. Especially the second half where he asked me about my current relationship. And I don't talk about my relationship too much. At least I haven't been. You guys know that in the past I've talked about my relationship or my dating struggles, I should say. And over this past year, basically, the first half of the year, I've found myself in a relationship that I'm extremely blessed to have. I think my girlfriend has done an amazing job of adding to my life. And it's just one of those things that's kind of made me change the way I look at things and how I say things. I think that's super important on not only the context of what you're saying it, but also how you're saying it. I know we live in a time where people are attacking that belief, but I think to be a well rounded individual, you should care about how you say things. What you're saying is also obviously fucking important, but like how you're saying it to people and the tone you're saying it to someone, like it does matter. Like you could argue a fact is a fact no matter how it's said. Like the sky is blue versus the sky is fucking blue. It's the same thing, but how you make people feel does matter. We are humans living a human experience, and I will push back against that argument that just a fact is a fact sometimes. And I talked about this on the episode that I have with Wally that's coming out of kind of creating original thoughts and how they're formed. And I did state that a fact is a fact no matter who says it, and I do agree with that. But I also agree with the concept that like how you say something should matter. And being in a relationship, like you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of your partner's triggers, your partner's traumas, how they feel about certain things. And I think it's important to kind of gauge where they are on certain topics and ideas. And I think that you should do that earlier in the relationship rather than later and find out that you guys aren't compatible. But for my relationship, I'm not going to go into crazy detail. I like to keep my relationship private, but it's been nothing but amazing. It's changed like my content for sure and how I view my content. And I don't just produce content just to make it anymore. I want it to actually have value. And a lot of the times where I haven't dropped episodes during weeks is sometimes because guests will cancel. That still happens every once in a while, and it just is what it is. But I've been more proactive in doing things with my girlfriend and kind of getting out there and experiencing. I think over the last like several years since doing this podcast, I've been so focused on creating the podcast, creating the content, getting it out there. And I haven't really taken a lot of time for me. I've had vacations here and there, but the podcast is a real fundamental part of my life now. And being able to kind of just separate that a little bit and kind of experience love again has been something so amazing, to be honest, especially reflecting on about a year ago this past weekend. Was 1 year since my beloved family dog Jenna passed away. We put her down just about a year ago, a little over a year ago now. And that was something that I really struggled for a long time, still struggled. I mean, that 1 year anniversary brought up a lot of emotions for me, and that was a real difficult thing to kind of process again, just kind of like she's gone, never coming back, and you're never going to experience that type of love with a family dog like that. It'll be different with every dog going forward, but having this relationship come into my life kind of unexpectedly and kind of bless my life, and I just feel so much more appreciation and more full of life. If you've seen my post, my stories, like even when I'm with my girlfriend, I've had people say that I look happier, and to be honest, I feel happier. Um, I've stopped really with the TikTok stuff. Like I don't think producing sad boy relationship content is beneficial to a positive, healthy relationship. So that's taken a backseat. I think I will create content on TikTok again as long as TikTok is still available in the United States, unless that changes. But there will be new content coming to TikTok. I kind of am figuring out a way to take this content from my podcast and kind of shift it towards and towards my TikTok, I should say. And I've always wanted to post my podcast stuff on TikTok, but those two just never felt like they were going to collide like really well. So going into the rest of this year, hopefully I'm going to invest into a new camera. The third camera that I should get is a third angle to record myself. And hopefully when I get to do that, I'll have that content and I could push it onto TikTok and change my content. I think that was something I struggled with doing for a long time and I was scared to do, was to change my content on TikTok because I was afraid to lose followers, I was afraid to lose likes, I was afraid to lose views. And I understand how silly that was at the time. It was everything, but now it's not. And things are changing for myself in the way I view content, and just producing it nonstop wasn't it was good at the time, but now it's not the same for me. I think it was becoming less genuine, and I was feeling that in my TikToks specifically, not the podcast. The podcast has been really great, but the TikTok content was just be feeling very forced for myself. It's hard to create sad content when you're not truly sad about something. It was pulling on past emotions, and I don't think that was a healthy mind state to kind of be in. So I kind of stopped at the beginning of 2023, and I met my girlfriend right around that time, and it just kind of one of those things. It just worked. Like I hate the cliche saying, when you know, but I we just knew it just worked. It clicked. It was just everything that I could have ever wanted, and is what I want. And it's just a blessing, and I truly appreciate her as a person. It's definitely made my life a lot better, and it gives me something to look forward to every single day. And I feel like that was important to say on a solo episode, to kind of recognize that, and kind of how this mindset that I've had with content is always kind of ever changing. And I'm just kind of growing through that process still. And I don't think it's ever going to stop. I was actually looking at a clip from a video game streamer called Cypher PK. He specifically really does Fortnite. He's available on Twitch and stuff. Check him out. He's a great streamer. But it was a clip on TikTok where he was talking about his career basically. And I think it was like 2012 was the video. It was a graph. And I'm pretty sure it was the views on his channel. And around 2017 when Fortnite popped off to now, the graph was like huge. It was all the way up. And he showed I think it was 2012, right around there. And it was like flat. There was like no views. He's like, and if you aren't willing to go through this time, you don't deserve the rest of that. And then he's like, if you started later, like 2017 when Fortnite was popping, that is your period of flatness. So you still have to go through the process. You can't just expect to be somewhere without putting in the work. The work is necessary for the success. You have to struggle, you have to grind, you have to go through all these things to create great content. And part of this journey that I'm on is discovering what works for me, what doesn't work for me. And you have to go through that process regardless of who you are when you're kind of producing content on social media or YouTube or Twitch or wherever you're producing it. And that's why I'm saying content isn't everything, but you should care about what you're making. That's the difference. The quality is more important than the quantity. And I needed to learn that through trial and error, and I'm still learning that. Maybe I will change certain things with the content I'm creating now versus later, and just figuring things out. But for myself, it was important to get behind this mic, work this kind of skill that Wally was referring to on his episode of ranting. And for those of you that are close to me in my life, you know that I can talk and talk and talk and talk. So I'm doing that in my life, like my personal life, but on a podcast, I felt like it was important to get behind the microphone, kind of give you guys a life update of like why I haven't been producing as many episodes as I've done in the past. Um, I've just been busy with life. I have a relationship that I want to invest more time into. I'm not saying that this podcast isn't important, but it's taken a back seat to the fact of like I'm not just gonna make content just to make content. Like I want it to be valuable. I want it to be something worthwhile. I want to enjoy it, and I don't enjoy the solos as much. So if I have a week in between episodes where I'm not recording, I'm not just gonna force myself to do a solo. Like in the past, I would have done that, but I just don't want to do that anymore. And I think it's important every once in a while to record a solo like this for you guys so you can hear my voice, see the voice behind the Carroll connection, and kind of get a life update. It's good for myself to kind of just work the skill and also to look back on in the future to see how things have gone. But I do have a lot of great things coming up. I have a lot of trips planned, concerts to go to. Summer's been great so far. I have a Germany trip coming up in September, so I'll be taking some time off from the podcast then. And I'm just really excited going into the end of the year to produce more content and then hopefully add another piece of equipment to the podcast and hopefully figure out how to add a third camera, and maybe I'll figure out some different software to use and how to edit. And it's always about the constant growth. And I've been a big proponent of that, or a big supporter of that, I should say, since the early days of this podcast is slow and steady, add to the process, keep making the content, just work that muscle. And now I've gotten to the point where rest is also important. And I've talked about that before. So I've been taking more weekends off from the podcast, enjoying my time with my girlfriend, going out more, just taking weeks off, not forcing it so much, spending time with family, just getting away from this podcast. And for those who are in my life that maybe haven't seen me in a while, I do apologize for kind of that, but please understand that this podcast takes up a lot of my time. And then also being in a relationship, it's going to take up more of my time. And we are adults. I have a regular job. So just do understand that's kind of where I am in my life. I'm trying to build the pieces to ultimately where I want to go. And you guys know that family is super important to me. So that's something that I do want to build towards my future. So my focus is kind of on future goals, future aspirations, where to take this podcast, how to take this podcast to that level, and just continually creating the content because this gives me purpose. This is my passion. I really do enjoy this. And maybe one day I make money off this. Maybe one day I don't. Or I guess not one day because I still don't. But the being able to be creative and have that process is kind of really important to me. So I'm still trying to figure out a way to kind of balance all this, and it's a constant growth process with this. Like we're going to hit year 4, then we're going to strive to get to year 5. We should be hitting 150 episodes soon, which is a crazy phenomenal thing to be hitting. And then the goal after 150, 200. It's the constant growth. It's just keep on chucking away, having great conversations with great people. There's been so many great episodes this year. I hope you guys go back and check some of them out if you haven't already. Um, as you know, I don't like to do my solos too long, so I want to start wrapping up and giving you guys the big picture here, like I said. So content isn't everything. Focus on your process. Focus on the quality of the content that you're making. Don't stress the little things. Just keep working that muscle every single day, and you will get where you want to get if you continue with the process and be consistent. Consistency is so important into figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So when I say content isn't everything, it's through my own process of figuring out that producing stuff just to produce stuff, reviews, likes, and clicks isn't great. But if you need to learn that lesson, do it. It'll be a valuable lesson, and then you'll learn how to create more quality content. Quality over quantity every single time. And just be consistent. Hard work will pay off. The hardest workers always will succeed eventually. You could fall down 9 times, but that 10th time you still get up and you can win. You might not be a successful podcast or a streamer or a musician right now. 5, 10 years, if you continue with that grind, inevitably you will find success, but you also have to define what success is on your journey. Super important to hit that. We are coming towards the end of the podcast. I didn't want to make this a very long rant. I just wanted to kind of show face, get out here, talk a little bit, and I hope you guys really get a lot of value from these solos. And if you do, maybe shoot me a DM and tell me that you actually appreciate these solo rants or something like that, because I don't know how people feel about these. The numbers say that you guys prefer, obviously, my guest episodes, which I do too, but I would appreciate if people who listen to this can shoot me a message if you actually get some value, or if you want me to talk about something else or talk about a specific topic. And I'll take that in consideration and actually probably do it if you guys want to hear it. So please let me know in the messages privately or in the comments, whatever you guys choose to. But I've had a ton of great episodes so far this year. Please go check them out, like I said earlier. And I plan to have a lot of great new episodes going into the rest of the year. We'll finish out strong. And I'm going to try to bring back more people. So if you guys want to come on the podcast and have been already on the podcast, remind me. I'm a busy schedule person. It's like I have stuff booked out for a month in advance. So we're looking at the fall. But like I said, if you guys want to check out those episodes, go to thecarrollconnection.simplecast.com. Also available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the major listening platforms. If you like to watch your podcast, go on YouTube, search The Carroll Connection. Should pop up right for you. And if you want to be a guest or return as a guest, like I've said, hit me up on Instagram at Jared M. Carroll or at The Carroll Connection. So, till next time, guys, peace.